Ok, donc j'ai la chance et l'honneur de pouvoir présenter ta session. Session très attendue sur cet événement. Merci à toi d'être présent. Donc
plaisir.
le sujet, c'est du Power Automate.
Surprise.
Surprise. Donc petit rappel à tout le monde avant que ta session démarre. Donc n'oubliez pas de couper vos micros hein, pour ne pas interférer avec la session de Serge. N'oubliez pas non plus d'évaluer la session après l'événement. Vous avez dans un onglet du channel l'Excel pour pouvoir faire votre feedback. Vous avez l'espace café sur lequel vous pouvez poser tout type de questions. Et voilà, je pense que j'ai tout dit. Donc Serge, je te laisse la place. L'enregistrement est en cours et c'est à toi.
Super. We're going to switch to English. Est-ce qu'on voit mon desktop? Oui, on voit le slide. Gilles, tu vois?
Pas
Est-ce qu'on voit
encore.
bien? Pas encore? Ça arrive. Non?
Alors, je pense que c'est bon. Après moi, mon Teams a un petit souci, mais ça doit être bon, je pense.
Can anyone confirm that you can see my desktop? In the chat, yeah. Okay, so I think we can start. Nobody complained. So welcome to this session about how to become a Power Automate hero in 2021 with Dr. Flo. Just during this session, I will mention different topics that I cover in my Orlando Ignite session last year. So here are the reference. Okay, so I will move quite quickly over these topics. And I'm Dr. Flo, so I'm also known as Serge Luca. I'm an Office 365 MVP and also a business application MVP. I'm based in Brussels, and my company is powerplatformassociate.com. So the goal of this session is to talk about how to use Power Automate in enterprise, so making enterprise application with Power Automate. And the very first thing you need to be that you need to do is to make IT happy. And making IT happy means that first you need to start working or explaining the Power Platform governance. And you need to make sure that IT understand the Power Platform capabilities. There are a lot of capabilities, right? Usually they underestimate the capabilities of these tools. And then quickly you need to show how to secure the platform. And securing means that first you need to focus on the DLP policy. So you can, and that's very new, now you can block connectors. Okay, that's a new feature in the Power Platform Administration Center. Most connectors, not all connectors, but most of them can be blocked. And then you can also show how to monitor the platform. So if you go to the Power Platform admin, you have a lot of monitoring tools, including, but not limited to, analytics. Also, you need to show how to alert. So if something wrong happened in the Power Platform, you can get an alert. But also if a new developer, a new app creator start working on an app, he can get an alert, a notification with an email explaining how they can work, or they can find help, and what are the governance rules to follow. That's important. So these last three steps are a way to reduce risk in the Power Platform adoption. Next, if it's part of the strategy to bring citizen developers, then you need to put a strategy for nurturing a community. And also, you need to explain how the company can support and provide some operation support on the Power Platform. Example, people need to know how take what the action they need to take to get some help. Or if a flow or an application crash, I mean, IT need to be alerted. Okay, so for instance, a ticket can automatically be generated, something like that, right? So that's support of operation. Of course, we can spend several hours just talking about this. The last 5 steps are covered by a free tool called the Center of Excellence that you can download from GitHub. I will describe what Power Architecture is. I will explain that in the next slide. So you need to explain what's the architecture of the Power Platform. In many cases, your project will be driven by the business. So with the business, you can iterate fast. Don't forget to still communicate with IT. That's very important. Application lifecycle management in the Power Platform is quite weak. I will show you how I manage that. Licensing is very confusing. People don't understand. So IT does not understand licensing. There are many capabilities. They don't understand the per flow license. You can create premium application and you can put the premium feature in the flow only, not just in the Power Apps. That means that for instance, $500, you are covered for all premium feature as long as you just move this premium feature in the flow, not in the app. But that's very interesting. Licensing is confusing. You need to set an environment policy in place. How many environment? Who need an environment? DLP policy, I mentioned that before, monitoring, that the Center of Excellence, and the support model. Power Architecture, I mentioned that before. What is this? This is the way I explain the architecture of my enterprise application created with the Power Platform. We start from the bottom, so we have the storage layer. So in the storage layer, you can have SharePoint list, document libraries, SQL analysis service, common data service. And then we have the business layer. In the business layer, that's basically flow most of the time. Then we have the UI layer, so the user interface, where you can find things like Microsoft Teams, SharePoint Forms, Power Apps Canvas, Power Apps model-driven apps, Power Apps Portal, and now Power Virtual Agent. On top of that, we have the analytics layer. That's where you are going to manage the insight, the KPIs, for instance. So that's basically the role of Power BI, but also AI Builder. There is another layer, which is the logging layer. All applications need to log information somewhere in a central place. So this logging layer is very important, especially for support and operation. And I recommend you to use an Azure tool, which is the Azure Application Insight, where you can send all the logging information. You can centralize all the logging information out there. That's very important and very handy. Communication between the layers. So UI layer will communicate with the business layer to talk to the storage layer most of the time. Sometimes, if the business logic is simple enough, then the UI layer can directly communicate with the storage, or at least in read mode. The analytics layer will communicate in read mode with the storage layer to build analytics. And this, the red rounds here, are the place where we need the common data service. We need common data service for this, this, and this. Also, the flow will talk to the logging layer here, but now the UI layer can also talk to the logging layer.
Serge,
Yes.
Serge,
Oui.
Est-ce que tu peux juste minimiser la petite boîte? Voilà.
Voilà.
Merci.
Okay.
Désolé.
Sorry. So you need to make IT happy because they must give you environment. They must create a maker or a service account for your Canva and Power Apps. They must authorize your connectors in the DLP policy. And you need to give them your package, your zip file, or even better, no, your solution. So I don't recommend you to use zip file or packages. I recommend you, when you create something from scratch, to create that in solution now. And then the love story can start. Regarding ALM, so application lifecycle management. Well, ALM is quite weak in the Power Platform, but let me explain this. For each department or each service, I define one service account for the maker and of course for the connection. When you define a service account, don't deactivate the license, because I've noticed that IT people by default, deactivate all the license. You need the Office 365 license, right? You need a CDS license. It should be there, activated by default, even though it does not require premium. So keep the license for the service account. And then for the dev environment, I define one service account and one environment for the dev environment. Okay, so one environment for the dev for each department, one environment for test UAT for each department, one environment for production for each department. Okay, this kind of model seems to be working quite well, at least for my customers. Now, ALM is quite weak in the Power Platform. Let me show you how I define ALM in Flow, for instance. So let me switch to my virtual machine. So this is a flow that connects to SharePoint. And this flow here, so let me switch there, just retrieve information from a SharePoint list, right? Get items. So you connect to this list here, well, this side, this list, and you just retrieve information. This action just retrieve information from an Excel document in this document library in this SharePoint site. When you create flows in Enterprise, they are quite big. We have many actions. And if you want to deploy all your flow to another environment, I mean, all this information should change because you have to point to the new environment, to production, to test, to UAT, etc. So you might waste a lot of time into changing that stuff, and that's error prone. So what I do is this: I use dynamic value. Let me show you the same thing with dynamic value. Get items, connect to this site, this list, and I provide dynamic value. I will show you how to define the dynamic value. But basically, I grabbed information from this. I grabbed information from the dynamic value, etc., etc. I do that for the Excel action as well. If you take a look at this, you have dynamic value everywhere. And I defined in the param scope an object called param, which is a JSON object with a schema. You see, site URL, ALM list, Excel file, etc. I generate that for a sample. And then there are different ways to do this now. If you work in production, you can have a compose with your information. This is my site, this is my list URL, this is my Excel drive, Excel table, etc. And I pass this object to param, and that works. So if you move to another environment, you will just change this link. That's it. Okay. Now, if you have premium feature, you can define environment variable. Well, environment variable does not require a premium feature. So in your solution, or someone need to mute his microphone. So in the solution, this is my solution. You can.
Serge, on t'entend plus, tu dois être sur mute.
Yes, I was on mute. I don't know why. Someone mute me. Okay, so someone mute me. That's funny. Don't mute the speaker. So, so this is JSON information, and let me copy that again. Okay, here is JSON. You store that in your environment variable. Okay, so you can believe me, this is JSON, right? It's in your environment variable, and then your flow can read that. So I've created a flow that just do that. You just pass the environment variable name. I want to grab the production value. This flow retrieve information and send that to params. And that works. So I can deploy everything to any environment in just a few seconds, right? That's really interesting. So now let's move to the next part. Yeah, make your code maintainable. Obviously, that's very important. How can you make your code maintainable? Document your code. comment your code, use a lot of scopes. There are many reusability patterns that I will explain. Filter early, use select, and follow naming convention. Let's take a look at that. So in my VM, we are here. Make your code maintainable. First, when I create a flow, I have a first object, which is documentation, first action, documentation. I provide some documentation, the goal, documentation, the version, the author, how to deploy it, etc. Next, I use in the scope for the initialization, where I initialize my compose. We cannot initialize variable in scope, not yet. I've always have a try and a catch. That's for error handling. I will explain error handling later. In a try, I use a lot of scope. Normally, you should read this just and understand by following the scope name. And this is my ALM. That's where I grab the ALM information, so the param object. And if you take a look at one scope, I comment everything. I follow a naming convention, which is the action name hyphen the location hyphen an additional comment here, you see, and more. Okay, so keeping your code maintainable is very, very important. Also, let's switch to the slide. Make your code fast and scalable. Most of the time, a flow should not be fast, but when there is a communication with the UI, then it must be fast. So minimize usage of variable, because the variable are quite slow. They are protected against concurrent access. Use more compose. Minimize loops. Loops takes a lot of resource. Use concurrency. Use batch. Filter on the server first, and use the filter action. So let's explain this with a demo. Okay. So code fast. This flow, grab data from a SharePoint list, and we'll try to find all the, I think, all the expense where the status is rejected. So you can do this: get item, retrieve everything, then you have an apply to each, and you have a condition here where you check if the status is rejected, right? So you can do that, but that's very slow, because you have to go through every items, of course. You can make your code faster by using concurrency. So in the settings here, you can specify that you want your loop to run on several threads. By default, it's off, so you can put it on. And this means that your loops will run in 25 threads. So that's concurrency. That's easy to do, right? The next thing is, instead of going through everything, you can use the filter array. Filter array will filter in the client. Client means the flow, not in the data source. In this case, the data source is SharePoint. But this filter array is very, very efficient. So with the filter, you don't have to put a condition in your code, right? Even better, you need to filter on the data source. So in every action, well, most action, there is a filter query. So you can define an OData filter. Okay, that's much, much more performant. That is the best practice. So filter in the data source. Okay. Also, let's take a look at this code. This code is slow because it's run sequentially, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. But you can also run everything in parallel. Scope 1 in parallel, scope 2 in parallel, scope 3 in parallel, right? So this is way faster. Faster than you can be throttled. That's another problem with the Power Platform. There is throttling. Let me get back to the slide. Manage error. Error happen, okay, in any application. You need to manage them and minimize the error as well. So use the question mark symbol, which means that if your object is null, it won't crash, right? So by default, you should use question mark everywhere. It should be by default anyway, but it's not in the platform like this. Use coalesce, because if in some operator like the switch, when the object is null, the switch crash. Okay, so use coalesce. So if it's null, replace that with something else. Log locally. So if there is some error in your flow, store this information in a local location, like a local SharePoint list, for instance, in such a way that the business can have a look at it. But also log centrally. That's for IT. IT need to be aware that something wrong happened. So don't hide the errors for IT, right? I will show you how to do that. So demo, manage error. Let's go. And here, this is a flow. Well, all my flow, you have a try and a catch. So this is a scope, try. That's where all my code is. And I have a catch. And the catch uses the error handling mechanism, which is in the Power Platform, which is in Power Automate, which is that this will run if, configure after, if this object here, the try, has failed, is skip, or is timeout. You should do that in every flow by default. And then what you can do is to grab the error information. So you can do that here in the compose by using a function called result of try of this guy. And this will return an array of every action with their status. One of them has failed. So you can filter the action that failed. And then you can store the list of action that failed locally. So for instance, in my case, it's in a local SharePoint list or in Azure Application Insight. So here I've called an Azure function. This is an Azure function that call Azure Application Insight, and this information is stored centrally for IT. Also do this, put a terminate with fail. If you don't specify fail, your error will be hidden. IT need to be aware that something wrong happened. And in the next slide, I will show you what Azure Application Insight look like. So this is Azure Application Insight. You can put a lot of information about your application here. But also here in the analytics in the Power Platform Administration Center, you have analytics on the Power Automate. And if your flow generates an error, it will show up here. So that means if you go through the try catch, use terminate with an error so that your flow will be part of it, of this red part, right? So, and then IT can investigate how to improve it. This blog post from the Power Apps team illustrate how to log, how to provide telemetry information of your apps by using Azure Application Insight. I recommend you to read this blog post. Now the limitation. There are limitations in every tool. Flow duration is still, let's hide this guy here. Flow duration is still 30 days. Yeah. So after 30 days, your flow stops. If you want to do more than 30 days, you need to follow my controller pattern that I will explain quickly, but there is something new. I would like to show you later on something that I've created during the last weeks, a way to override many flow limitations without using premium. So the first way was to use the controller pattern. I've showed this pattern 2 years ago. I will explain that quickly, but I have something new. So the new is the case management pattern. I should have mentioned that here. Flow approval duration, 30 days. If you want to do more, you can use a CDS trigger when a record is updated, which require premium, or use the controller pattern, or use the new case management pattern that I will show you. 500 action per flow. That's maximum number of action. You want more, you have to have a flow that call another flow, create nested flow. Or you can raise a support ticket to get more. Loops still limited to 5,000 in a do until, 5,000 in apply to each, and if you have premium, you get 100,000 in apply to each. But you can have, I think, do until in do until. You can have embedded loops, of course. You cannot cancel a flow automatically. Actually, you will see what I mean. I will illustrate that. If you want, you can use a controller pattern, or you can create your own approval system, which I did, and I will show you that. There's no state machine. Actually, you can, but you have to create your own stuff. Controller pattern, or the new thing that I will show you. Application lifecycle management and DevOps is still weak, but new tools are coming. So there is a Power Platform Azure DevOps component that have been featured at the Business Application Summit or at the Build a few weeks ago. You cannot resume a flow. So when a flow stops, you cannot restart it from where it stopped for any reason. So that is in the roadmap of the flow of the Power Automate team. There is a limitation in the number of API you can call. You get throttling. Throttling means by default it's 500 calls per 5 minutes per user or per account. You don't get an error. The system just slows down. There is a limitation on 24 hours depending on your license. If you use the Office 365 license, it's 2,000 calls per user per 24 hours. But again, it's not an error. It's just the system slowed down. Make your code reusable. Code reusable. You can use loops. You can have flow call flow, which is my favorite way to reuse code. We have child flows now in Power Automate. You can create custom connectors, but custom connector require premium license. You need to master approval. You cannot create enterprise application without approval. And what I'm going to show you, not now, but just in several minutes, is something that nobody has never seen. Only one person, Isabelle. So first, when you create an approval in Flow, there is a limitation. After 30 days, your approval stops. Your flow stops, your approval stops. So the first pattern is to have a parallel scope where you're going to check if you reach 30 days. So for instance, after 28 days, you can notify the approval that the approval will expire or doing something, right? So this is a first pattern. So keep it simple. But there are some situations where you need a state machine. Let me explain an example. A user published a legal document. To be approved, to be finally approved, this document needs to go through several steps. Advisor, so a group of people, need to validate the content. Then secretary office need to validate the style. Then the big boss need to validate the final document. And this is quite easy to implement in Power Automate. The thing is, if you want to get back, if boss reject, you go back here. So you need to get back to this state. If this guy reject, you need to get back here. Reject, you need to get back here. Boss can redirect to this stage, to this one or to this one, right? So that's normal life, that's normal business requirement. And that's not easy to do in Flow. Actually, no, you can. I will show you how to do that. Let me take another example. A user submit a travel expense. So an employee submit a travel expense. This expense will be approved by your first line manager. If the line manager doesn't react, then it will escalate to the big boss. And if the big boss does not react, it will escalate to the big boss again and again and again. So we did this example 2 years ago for a company. So the product is still, well, the application is still running every day, it works well. And the way we did it is by we follow something that I've created, which is I've called it the controller pattern. Let me explain quickly because I have something even better, which is when a travel is created, we start a flow, the launcher flow. And the flow will call another flow, the line manager. That's where the approval for the line manager will happen. If the line manager doesn't react on time, we have to go to the big boss, right? But these are service flow. That means they run maximum 30 days. After 30 days, they stop and they call each other. Okay, so there's actually no limitation because the system always run. So for having this running correctly or to be manageable, you need a guy in the middle. I've called it the controller. And basically the launcher flow called the controller called the line manager. We wait for the line manager to approve. And after some time, this flow here send a message back to the controller. It's approved, it's rejected, or just before 30 days, it's a timeout. And then the controller decides what's to do next. If it's a timeout, the controller will redirect to the big boss. Same story, same messages. And in this case, if it's a timeout, the controller will ask big boss again and again. What is important to understand is these are stateless flows, right? They run, they are called, they call another one and they stop running. So, and when this one called this one, well, this one is triggered. So you go beyond, you bypass the 30 days limitation. How can you have call flowing or flow calling flow? So first you can use HTTP. A flow call another flow by using HTTP. And the flow that you call should start with one HTTP request. But the thing is, that's what I did 2 years ago. And then the Power Automate team make that premium. And then I use a database. You put a message in a database, in this case, SQL Server, SQL Azure, and then that triggered on the flow. They made it premium. I use a service bus in Azure, the Azure service bus, put a message in a queue. They made it premium. I didn't take that personally. And then I've used SharePoint list for putting message in SharePoint list that trigger the flow. That works very well. That's very robust, and it will never require premium. You can also use run HI flow, but there are some limitations here. Okay. When you use approval, don't forget to specify the notification hierarchy. That means you need to notify previous approver. So let me take an example. User 1 approved or approved with a comment. And user 2 now need to approve. So user 2 approve or approve with a comment. That means if you user 2 approve with comment, user 1 might want to be notified. Okay, notify the previous approvers. They need to be aware that there was a new comment. Same, user 3 approve with comment, then they need to notify user 2 and user 1. So notification of approval is very important. Also, I've learned that you need to define a BPM role. So someone in charge of the whole process. So log everything. So everything you do, whatever you do, need to be logged somewhere. The BPM role must monitor. So you can have several people behind the BPM monitor role. This role must be able to cancel approval, and the BPM role need to be notified when something new happened. Someone approved, someone put a comment, something like that. Visualize your approval. So you need a way to display the different approval. This is an example of what we did 2 years ago. For the expense Seattle, we can follow the approval steps, you see? So the approval was submitted to this person and then submitted to this one. So that's the escalation. And finally, it has been approved by this guy. So we did it with Power BI. You can visualize the approval like this, like this, like this, like this. Okay, that's a dream. This is not out of the box, the Power Platform. Or like this. We did it. Let me show you how that works. What time is it? Yes. We still have 30 minutes. Okay, so first I want to illustrate quickly the controller pattern, and then I will show something new. This is my SharePoint site. That's where I submit expenses. This is a Power BI dashboard that displays everything related to my expenses. And of course, the data are powered by a flow. So basically, let me show you that. We have a SharePoint list. When a user stores information in the SharePoint list, a flow will start. The status of the flow will show up in the list. Okay, and of course, when the flow starts, well, the flow that starts is the launcher flow. So when a new expense is created, is the launcher flow. So here, what we do is we call the controller. We call the controller flow, and we pass information about the expense. The controller will call the line manager approval, which is a web service, as you can see here. And the line manager, this is how I did implement that. The way I implement the line manager flow is like this. So basically, I create an adaptive card because I want to send this information to a channel. So there is a channel for the procurement team. Let me show you what we have. Oh, I don't have it here. Let's go to the procurement team. And you will see something regarding procurement team is here, contours of finance, procurement, and yeah, so you see some information in the procurement team show up about a new expense. And I was here, and then I start working on the approval. I do that in 2 steps, create approval and wait for approval. Why? Because when you do that in 2 steps, you get an adaptive card that you can brand and you can post that to the user. So basically the user, let me show you the user, what the user see. The user will get a notification here. And what is nice is that you can brand it. It's a bit slow. I want to use the web. Okay. And basically, the user will get an approval request that looks like flow like this. It's coming. Yeah, like this. You see? So you can brand your approval request. User can click on approve or reject. So you can completely brand that. Okay. So people like that. So that's what I do here, brand approval, and I post that and I wait for the approval. And then two situations. The line manager can react on time. It did react on time. And then I call the controller and I say it's done. Okay, so I send information to the controller, it's done. Or the user didn't react on time, so the line manager didn't react on time. Then I call the controller and I say, hey, it's a timeout. And the controller will redirect to the big boss, right? So that's basically how the controller pattern works. And well, that's nice, but it works. It's quite flexible. I'm very proud of it. But no, there is something new. I've been working on this, what I've called a case management pattern. Very new. You are the first to see this. I will do a video for the Power Automate team next week, so they will be informed of this. So we have internal discussion about this. But look, case management pattern. How does that work? You have a case like an approval. An approval is a case. Example, someone submit an expense or someone make an HR request. So the first place is you need a list, for like a SharePoint list or a table, for storing the case. And then the case, you need another repository, another SharePoint list or another table for the case lifecycle. So example, this case will have a lifecycle step one, and then step 2, and then step 3. If there is another case in the same place, store here, and then the lifecycle in this lifecycle case. Step 2, step 3, etc., etc., etc. This is the pattern, case management pattern. Well, that's how I call it. Now, let me show you what you can do with that. And normally, you should say, whoa. You should say, whoa. Let me try to show you this. You know what? If you want to use approval with flow, well, don't use flow approval. Let me explain what I mean. Look, this is what you need to do if you want to use flow for real enterprise application. Someone submit a case, an expense, and specify the approvers. Click on submit. You want to be able to have one place where you can monitor all your workflows, all your cases. One case can mean several steps. If you ask, well, the expense, approval of the expense can go through maybe 10 people, 10 different people, different service. And you need to be able to monitor that. Look here. First time, you've never seen something like this. Case dashboard. I can see all my flow here. So each line is a case. You see? And each case, you can see the different case status. This one is stopped. This one is running. This one is running. You can filter to get the different cases. This is my case. Travel to Kipushi. This is a city in Congo. Travel to Amsterdam. It's still running. Let's take a look at the waiting case. These are my waiting case. I can monitor all my cases. These are the stops. You can search. I want to find all the cases containing Paris. Is this one? You see? Even better. Let's take, for instance, I will take which one? Let's go to London. You want to take a look at the London workflows? Well, you click on London in the dashboard and you can follow the London. You can interact with it. You click on this guy. You see, you can have property information. If this guy, or I can find another example, maybe with a comment. Don't know, there is someone with Well, I can show you another one with a comment. I don't know, but so if there is a comment, you will see a sign here, meaning that there is a comment. If this is gray, that means this step has been skipped, maybe because the person was in holiday, something like that. Orange means that the system is waiting for this. And this is the last steps. If I show you another example, let's take Toronto, for instance. Toronto, I click on Toronto. Okay, so Toronto expense, yeah, it's not. This is not a good one. This is not a good one. Yeah, this one, Tunis. Yeah, why not this one? If I go to Tunis, you see, so the system, well, the expense has been submitted to this person, and this person did approve. So you see, there is an icon here, meaning you have a comment. Comment could be an attachment as well. So it could be text and or attachment. The system is waiting on this user. If you are the BPM role, and I am the BPM role, then I can do this. I want to skip this step because this guy is in holiday. I don't want to wait. I mean, we don't want to block the system here. Or you can say, I want to reassign that to another person. I want to reassign that to another guy. Like, oh, let's call that user 2. Okay, you just click here. This is a proof of concept, right? So I should be able to automatically retrieve the user email address, but you click on confirm. Okay, on this step, confirm. The system will work, and the system will reassign that to this guy. Normally, the dashboard will refresh automatically, but if you want, you click here, and you will see, no, it's user 2, right? And you can say, oh, I want to add a new step because, oh, there is a new guy. I mean, there is a new approver. I didn't know that when I start the workflow. Let's add a new step. I want to add a new step over there. And the new step will be for, let's say, user 5. It's June. Okay, normally you should have user 5 here. It can take a moment to get this new user, but if I refresh, now you have a new step. And all the other steps have been renamed. So you can redirect, you can skip, you can reassign, you can insert a new step. People can delegate their task. They can say, oh, I'm going to be in holiday from this time to this time, so I want to delegate that to my secretary, for instance. And then the system will check that. All the waiting states, all the future state. So you can see the future here. You see the future state, right? And if people get a, let's say, they are being asked for approving something, they will get something, an email. And look at this. In the email, I will take another one. I take another one. Yeah, Tokyo, for instance. They say, oh, please approve this. User will just click on this, and they will see what we call a task form. This is my task form. You see the request information. You can approve, you can reject, you can brand your task form. You want to know where you are in the workflow, just click on show graph. You are here. So you can display the step before, the step after, before, because when you put a comment, you want to know who will be in the loop. If your director is in the loop, I mean, you will be very careful with the comment, right? So all these things are not available out of the box in Flow. So I've created a framework for you. So this will be shared for free. I will create a lab, I will create a blog post, I will explain the pattern, I will explain everything. You are the very first people to see that. Here, everything is in SharePoint. You don't need any premium license. I've completely bypassed the out-of-the-box approval system because it didn't fit my needs or my customer needs. Okay, there's no 30 days limitation. There's no limitation at all. You do what you want. Okay, people have their dashboard. They click, they see all their tasks. Okay, so you don't have to wait an additional year to get some new feature from the Power Automate. If you want, you can use Common Data Service. instead of SharePoint. I mean, if you have the premium license, why not? It's very fine. But I hope that you like this this thing. Okay. Well, that was an example of the case management. You are the first to see that. If you like it, put a comment in the. No, you can use AI, artificial intelligence, but only when it makes sense. Example, let's have the following case. An employee submits travel expense. It must be approved by the first line manager. If the line manager doesn't react, okay. But the thing is, this works, but then you'll get a lot of notification. And the customer can say, oh, we get too many emails. Can you minimize that? Of course. You can use machine learning in the controller pattern, but also in the case management pattern. You can use machine learning. So we did it. We've created a new branch called the virtual boss, where the system guesses based on the previous approval. The system can say, oh, there is a high probability that this guy will approve. So we can go to the next step. Okay, so we did it by defining, actually, Isabel did it, defining an Azure ML in Azure Machine Learning Studio. So we did it, and it worked very well. Instead of using machine learning, you can use the AI Builder in the Power Platform. Okay, so you can also do that. So I recommend you to use AI Builder. But we use Azure Machine Learning because it was before AI Builder. Now, we still have 15 minutes. There are still other patterns that you need to be aware of, I think. Easy patterns. So the communication between Power Automate to Power Apps could be confusing. Let me explain. Alex call or use a Power App. The Power App call a flow. The flow run with the service account. Let's call that flow service account, right? So which could be an Office 365 account, for instance. The question is, well, this flow communicates with SharePoint, a SharePoint list or SQL Server or whatever. The question is, who access SharePoint? Who access SharePoint? Is it the flow service account or is it Alex? Many people believe that it's the flow service account. It's not. It's Alex. So that means that you need to make sure that Alex has all the permission in the SharePoint list, right? But sometimes you need elevation of privilege because the flow that you call from Power Apps need to be able to do things that Alex cannot do. And the workaround, there are two workarounds. Actually, it's not a workaround, it's a pattern. This flow that you call from Power Apps can call a child flow. When you call a child flow, you can say, I want my child flow to run with the service account. Okay, that means that your child flow, this is the child flow here, can run with the flow service account. You have a flow that call a child flow. The child flow by default can run with the service account. So Alex does not need permission to access your SharePoint list anymore. Okay. And the question is, if this flow use a premium feature, well, actually, technically, only the service account need to have a license, a premium license. That's technically, but legally, you need to buy a premium license, not for Alex in this case, but you can buy a per flow license. So the per flow license means you pay $500, so something like 430 euros, and the whole company is covered up to 5 flows. That is very, very interesting. I mean, because 500 euros is better than paying premium to 6,000 people, right? So, and you are covered, and that's legal. Okay. There is another pattern, which is instead of having a flow that call a child flow, you can put a message in a SharePoint list that will trigger a flow, and then the flow will run with the flow service account, right? So that's how we did it before having child flow functionality, but it's still there. I mean, that's quite fine. So conclusion is there is more than that. So you need to learn more things. UI flow, so how to create flow that mimic user behavior. That's very important. Adaptive cart, Power Virtual Agent is very cool. Power Apps Portal, and by the way, Gilles Pommier has a Power Apps session I think just after mine, right? Learn the Common Data Service, so CS is very, very important, especially the security model, which is behind the Common Data Service, is much more powerful than SharePoint for this. Microsoft Form is very interesting. You need to master Azure Function, Service Bus. If you want your flow to integrate with existing application, so using Service Bus and Azure Event Grid is very important. The Azure API management is important. SQL Server Azure is important as well. Okay, so thank you very much. And I think we have some time for the question. We still have, I think, 10 minutes for the question. And let's take a look at the question. Are there any questions here? Question? Any question? Oh, 52%. That's a lot. Or maybe I'm pretty sure your question could be. Anyone has a question? No question. Your question is, yeah, I like your case management pattern, but I want to know how you did it. So first, let's go to SharePoint. Okay, my site. And the pattern, so when a user creates a case, the case is stored in this list. And this case will start a first flow. And this first flow will generate all the steps in advance. And then I have a second flow that will analyze the step. So you need actually two flows. Let me show you the first flow that generates the steps. It's a flow that generates a workflow. It's a meta workflow, if you want. Or, yeah, meta workflow. Let me show you quickly how that works. Solution. And so the benefit of my approach is, if you want to cancel an approval, just cancel approval. You don't need to buy or to create a custom connector. If you want to redirect, just redirect. I mean, you don't need a custom connector. You don't need premium. It's very easy to implement. So this is my solution. I've called that Approval Factory. And this is I have two flows, basically. The first is case generator. That's the one that starts when a new case is created. And then we have the case lifecycle, which is a second main flow. So case generator. Let me show you the code. Yeah, it's in the solution, so it's always a little bit slower. And so when an item is created, and somewhere, well, I load delegation, I fetch approver, initiation flow. This will become another flow. But basically, in this flow, as you can see, I create, no, sorry, it's here, generate flow steps. I generate the steps. I generate the steps based on the workflow logic. You can have different workflow logic. If it's serial, it will be user 1 that need to approve, followed by user 2, followed by user 3, followed by user 4. That's a simple case. That's the one I show you. You can have different cases. First, you go to the first department. In the first department, user 1 need to approve, and then user 2 need to approve. And then it will escalate to another department where another user will approve. If they say yes, fine, will escalate to another guy, etc. So it could be different. And let me show you internally how the application work. The key point is this. So I have two lists, one for the case, one for the life cycle. And you can see that here, when a flow is, when a case is created, automatically it gets a case number. This is the case number. And for the case number, I have a column called steps. So you can see the different steps, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. or 0, 1, 2, 3. You see, so the system in advance generates all the steps, and then I have another workflow that sets the status. This is in waiting mode. If you change information, you say it's approved, then a flow will be triggered because something's changed in the SharePoint list, something which has the tag approve, and then the system will try to find the next step and will set the next step in approve and the previous one in the next step in waiting and the previous one in approve. It's actually very easy, very simple. And just by using this pattern, I can bypass every flow limitation that are at the present. I mean, okay, there's no limitation. 0 license. Isn't that great? If you want to pay, you can, of course, but sorry, I mean, it's very cheap. Huh? I see maybe a question here. No, I see the question. Oh, whoa, people are quite happy. In some of the example, user need, yeah, let me show you the question. We still have 4 minutes. In some of the example, user need to be able to write SharePoint list via flow. How do you stop user accessing this list directly in SharePoint? Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, that's a very good question because my proof of concept is supposed to work for HR case. And when a user submits an HR request, permission is very important. So there is a private, a unique permission for the request in the case list, and also a unique permission for all request lifecycle. So only the user can see his information in the list, the user and HR. So the people who monitor the workflow. It's even more complex in the case of my customer, because even in HR, you have different departments, different specialists. So some specialists can see the information in the SharePoint list. Okay. So if your user go to the SharePoint, the user will only see some information about for himself. That's it. So users are even not aware that there is a SharePoint list. Everything is completely hidden by Power Apps. People use just Power Apps application. They never see the SharePoint site. I show you the SharePoint site just for the demo, but it's completely hidden. Okay, it's Power Apps. And also, if for any reason the customer want to upgrade from SharePoint to Common Data Service, because now they have the budget for moving to Common Data Service, they can. So I provide in my flows some, I would call that some extension point for moving from SharePoint to CDS. So it's compatible for SharePoint and CDS. Of course, they have to migrate the data from SharePoint to CDS, but changing the flow to adapt to CDS and SharePoint, it's quite easy. Okay, so of course, I recommend people to use CDS, but many of my customers don't have the budget for using CDS in the first place. They say, oh, maybe in 2 years. They can buy premium for the flow, but I mean, premium is still an issue. Other question. Isabel want me to turn my camera off. I have to turn my camera off. No, I want to keep the camera. This item concurrency.
So it's for the attendee. Attendee, please
yes.
turn your camera off.
Yes, for the attendees, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
We see them on your screen because you are sharing your screen.
I'm sharing the screen, yes.
So
another question. Nigel like it, okay. Yeah, no premium. Yeah, SharePoint HTTP trigger not premium. Of course, it's not premium. So in my proof of concept, I don't use HTTP at all. In the previous one, in the controller pattern, I use HTTP or I use SharePoint event, or I did everything, but then the flow team changed the licensing of this component. Okay, so yes, I mean, you have everything you need in this example. So today, if you want to cancel an approval, just an approval, you need to create a custom connector. To use custom connector, you need a premium license, right? If you want to redirect, it's even more complex because you need to go through 2 custom connector. I mean, it's more complex. And it's just the approval. What we want is sometime cancel all flow. How many times? We still have 1 minute, yes. You want sometime to cancel all flow. If I go to this flow, let's refresh this flow. If I want to say, hey, I want to cancel London. If I'm the BPM user, of course, I have the privilege to do that. Just click here. And you will see London will be is being stopped. So all the steps are stopped, right? And if you refresh that guy, it's black. And if you go back to the dashboard, let's go to the dashboard, you will see that London is black. Again, this is not in production. This is a proof of concept that I use to define something which will be more generic and free for the community. I insist. Let's take a look at London. So it's stopped. If I click here, London, yeah, London is stopped now. You see, so that works. I think, okay, thank you very much. I hope that you enjoyed the session. Thank you, thank you. Don't forget to put your evaluation. And, well, have a nice weekend.